They called him a king. But that day he was a storm. Word spread that David was coming, not with songs but with swords. His men were angry, hungry, ready to spill blood. And the one standing in his path was my husband. My heart raced when I heard the news. The servants' faces were pale. They said, "Abigail, David is on his way. He's coming for revenge." The ground beneath me felt cold. My hands shook. But something stronger than fear rose inside me. I couldn't let blood be spilled because of one man's foolish pride. Not today. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to pray long prayers. I only knew one thing. If I didn't move now, an entire household would die before sunset. So I gathered food, loaded the donkeys, and rode straight toward the fury of a king. And that's where my story begins. Let me take you back to where it all started. My home was large, filled with servants, fine wine, and laughter that never reached the heart. People said my husband was a great man, blessed with riches and flocks that covered the hills of Carmel. But I knew the truth behind the walls. Nabal's heart was harder than the stones that built our house. I had learned to move carefully in that home, to speak gently when anger boiled around me, to smile even when silence was safer. He loved his wealth, his wine, and his pride. But love for people, for God, those things had no place in his heart. So I stayed. Because sometimes, the hardest obedience is staying where you feel unseen, trusting that God can still see you. Every morning I woke before the sun. I would light the lamp, pour water for the servants, and whisper prayers no one heard. I prayed for peace. I prayed that God would hold my tongue when insult burned on my lips. I prayed that somehow my gentleness could quiet his storms. There were nights when he came home loud with drink, laughing too hard, shouting too easily. The servants would scatter. I would stand in the corner, silent, waiting for the storm to pass. When he slept, I would step outside under the stars, press my hands together and whisper, "God, teach me wisdom. Let my mouth speak peace when my heart wants to scream." Our home looked strong from the outside, but inside it was fragile. One wrong word could break the air. Yet God had given me a strange calm, a peace that wasn't weakness but strength wrapped in quietness. The servants often came to me instead of him. They trusted my words, not his temper. When one of them made a mistake, they would whisper, "Lady Abigail, please speak to him for me." And I would. I would walk to him slowly, wait for the right moment, and use the only weapon I had, wisdom. It wasn't easy living with a man whose pride filled every corner. But I had learned the secret of survival. When pride speaks loud, wisdom must speak softly. I loved my land, the olive trees that bent in the wind, the hills that smelled of sheep and soil. I found peace in small things, in the laughter of a child carrying bread, in the songs of the workers at harvest. Those moments reminded me that God still lived in simple things, even in a house where love had grown cold. Some nights, I sat by the window and watched the horizon where David's men were set to camp. I had heard stories, a shepherd turned warrior, a man running from a king's jealousy, yet still loved by God. I didn't know then that our paths would cross. I only knew that something in the air felt like change. So I prayed, "Lord, don't forget me in this house of noise and pride. If you ever send peace, let it find me ready." I didn't know peace was already on its way, wrapped in danger, carried by anger, and riding fast through the desert. That day had not yet come. For now I only knew the weight of silence and the ache of endurance. I had learned to smile for the world while bleeding inside my silence. The days were quiet that week, the air heavy with heat. The shepherds were still out in the wilderness, guarding Nabal's flocks, and for once things seemed calm. But trouble has a way of hiding behind peace, waiting for its hour. Word began to reach us in whispers, about a man named David. They said he lived in the hills with a band of warriors, men once broken now made strong under his command. Some said he was a fugitive, others said he was chosen by God. But all agreed on one thing: he was a leader unlike any other. David and his men had been near our lands for months. They never stole, never harmed. They protected our shepherds from raiders, treated them with kindness, and let no harm come near them. Even our servants spoke well of him. "Lady Abigail," one said with a smile, "they are like a wall around us day and night. We owe them much." When the season for shearing came, Nabal was in a good mood, drunk with success and pride. His barns were full, his wine jars overflowing. That was when David sent messengers. They came in peace. Dust on their clothes, hunger in their eyes, but respect in their words. They greeted Nabal kindly, reminding him how David's men had guarded his flocks without taking anything in return. Then they asked humbly if he would share some food, just a small kindness in return for the protection they had given. It was a simple request, one any noble man would grant. But my husband's heart had long been chained to pride. I wasn't there when the words were spoken, but I heard later how it happened. The men bowed low and Nabal laughed. "Who is David?" he sneered. "Some runaway servant? Many slaves break away from their masters these days. Why should I take my bread and meat and give them to men I don't know?" Laughter echoed through the courtyard, cruel, careless, and proud. The messengers left humiliated, dust rising behind their steps. When I heard what had happened, my chest tightened. Every servant in the house could feel the air change. The laughter died. The room grew quiet. Nabal went on eating and drinking, proud of his words, blind to the danger they had stirred. That night, one of the shepherds ran back from the fields, his voice shaking. "Lady Abigail," he said, his eyes wide with fear, "David heard Nabal's insult. He's coming. 400 men, armed with swords. They're already on their way." The jar in my hand slipped and shattered. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. For a moment I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at the servant's trembling lips. David, the man everyone called merciful, the man who fought for God, was coming with fury. I turned toward the door, hearing Nabal's laughter still echoing behind me. He had no idea what he had done. I felt it deep inside me, the storm was already on its way. And I knew then, David's sword would not miss its target. The night came with no peace. Even the stars seemed to hide behind the clouds. The air was thick and I could feel something moving in the wind. Something fierce, something unstoppable. I was sitting by the courtyard lamp when I heard hurried footsteps. A young servant burst through the gate, his face pale, his breath sharp and uneven. He bowed low, trembling as he spoke. "My lady," he gasped, "trouble is coming. David and his men are on their way." He swore he would not leave a single man alive in this house by morning. My hands froze over the table. For a moment I couldn't speak. I could hear only my heartbeat pounding like a drum in my chest. The servant's voice broke as he continued. "We tried to reason with your husband, but he mocked them, my lady. He called David a runaway slave. His pride has lit a fire that will burn us all. Please, if anyone can stop this, it is you." I looked at the young man's shaking hands, the terror in his eyes, and I felt my own fear rising. David, the man who killed Goliath, the one who fought lions and bears, was coming with 400 warriors. I could almost hear the sound of their footsteps in the distance. For a moment my knees weakened. My mind screamed to hide, to run, to pray. But a different voice rose inside me, quiet, firm, familiar. "Said move." I looked up and my fear began to shift into focus. This was no time for panic. If I waited for someone else to act, it would be too late. I stood quickly. "Gather the servants," I said. "Bring bread, wine, roasted grain, and meat. Bring raisins and figs. Load them on donkeys. Move quickly and quietly." They looked at me, confused, afraid. "My lady, will you tell your husband?" I shook my head. "No. He will only make it worse. Do what I say." As they ran to obey, I felt the weight of my choice. I didn't know if David would listen. I didn't know if I would survive the journey. But I knew this: God had not given me peace all these years just to let it end in blood. While they loaded the donkeys, I went to my room and knelt beside the window. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady. "Lord," I whispered, "you have given me wisdom, but I need courage too. Go before me. Soften his heart before I arrive." The courtyard filled with the sound of hooves and nervous whispers. The night smelled of fear and dust. I wrapped my shawl around my shoulders, climbed onto the lead donkey, and looked back at the house that had never truly felt like home. My servant's eyes followed me with desperate hope. I forced a small smile to steady them, though my heart was racing. I whispered one last prayer. let mercy reach him before my voice does. The road ahead was dark. The hills glowed faintly under the moon, and the wind carried the scent of battle. Somewhere out there, David was marching with fury in his eyes. I pressed my hand to my chest and took a deep breath. I didn't know what waited for me, but I knew I couldn't stand still. I couldn't wait for a miracle. I had to become one. The night air bit against my skin as I tightened the ropes on the donkeys. The baskets were heavy with food and wine. My fingers shook not from the weight but from the fear pounding through my veins. I moved quickly, directing the servants in hushed tones. Bread stacked in cloth. Jars of honey sealed tight. Skins of wine tied carefully to the saddles. Roasted meat, figs, raisins, every gift we could carry. It wasn't just food. It was an offering. A plea. A shield made of kindness. My heart whispered, please, Lord. Let this reach him before his sword does. When everything was ready, I climbed onto my donkey. The servants followed behind, each one silent, eyes wide, the moonlight catching their fear. The wind carried the smell of dust and fire from the valley ahead. Somewhere out there, 400 men were marching with anger burning in their chests. The road to the wilderness was narrow and rough. Rocks shifted under the hooves. The night creatures cried from the shadows. My shawl fluttered behind me as the wind grew stronger. I held the reins tight, whispering again and again, God, let mercy go before me. Please, go before me. The hills around me felt alive, as if even the stones were watching. I could hear distant shouts, the rhythm of movement, the sound of steel clashing against shields. The men were close. The sound of fury echoed through the dark, rolling like thunder. Each step felt heavier than the last. Fear clawed at my chest, but something else was rising too. Courage. A quiet fire that refused to die. I thought of the servants I left behind, the women sleeping in their tents, the children who didn't know what was coming. If I failed, blood would stain the ground before sunrise. The moonlight broke through the clouds for a moment, lighting the path ahead. I saw dust rising in the distance, moving fast. My breath caught. They were coming. I could see the glint of swords under the moon. The sound of shouting grew louder. My heart pounded so loud I could feel it in my throat. I whispered again, Lord, make him listen. Don't let rage blind him. Please, let my words reach before his blade does. The ground trembled as they drew near. The torches swayed in the wind, glowing like fire against the dark. I could see the faces of David's men now, hardened, angry, ready to fight. And then I saw him. He was riding in front, tall and fierce. His eyes blazed like fire caught in flesh. The air around him felt heavy, charged with purpose and fury. His jaw was tight, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword. He was not the gentle shepherd I had imagined from stories. He was a warrior. A storm wrapped in flesh. I stopped my donkey, my heart trembling between fear and awe. The dust settled around his feet as he slowed. His gaze locked on me, confused for a moment, then sharp with suspicion. There he was, the man after God's own heart, ready to spill blood. The valley was quiet except for the sound of hooves. The torches flickered against the night sky, painting faces in gold and shadow. The men stopped when they saw me. Dust rose around their feet like a curtain between fury and peace. David rode forward, his sword still at his side but his anger burning through his eyes. His men waited behind him, their hands gripping their weapons, ready to move at his command. I felt the ground shake beneath my feet, but I did not step back. My hands trembled as I climbed down from my donkey. My heart was beating so hard I thought he could hear it. But I knew I had come too far to turn back. I took one slow step forward, then another. My knees gave way beneath me and I fell to the ground. The dirt was cold against my palms, but I kept my head low. My voice came out soft but clear enough for every man in that valley to hear. My Lord, I said, let the guilt be on me. Do not mind my husband. His name is Nabal, and he is what his name means, foolish. But I, your servant, did not see the young men you sent. The wind went still. Even the horses stopped moving. I lifted my head slowly. David's eyes were fixed on me, confused, searching. His face still burned with anger, but it was beginning to change. I reached for the baskets beside me, my hands shaking. Please, I said softly, Accept this gift. It is from my hand, not his. Let it be a sign of peace, my lord. You have fought the Lord's battles. You have shed no innocent blood. Do not let anger stain your hands tonight." The men shifted uncomfortably. The torches hissed in the wind. No one spoke. I took a deep breath and went on, every word guided by something greater than my own courage. "The Lord will make you a lasting house. He fights for you. And when he gives you victory, you will not look back and remember this night with regret. Let this guilt rest on me, but let mercy rest on you." As the words left my mouth, the air changed. The tension that had filled the valley began to fade. I could feel the Holy Spirit moving, not in thunder or wind but in stillness. David's hand loosened on his sword. His breath slowed. His eyes, once sharp with fury, softened as if he could finally see again. He stepped down from his horse, the sound of his boots heavy in the dust. He came closer, his voice low and full of awe. "Blessed be the Lord who sent you to meet me tonight," he said. "And blessed be your wisdom, and blessed are you who have kept me from shedding blood this day." Tears stung my eyes. I bowed my head again, unable to speak. Around us, the soldiers lowered their weapons. The anger that had filled the night melted into quiet reverence. David reached out and accepted the gifts I brought. The look in his eyes had changed completely. The fire of wrath had turned into something holy: gratitude, humility, peace. I rose slowly, my knees aching, my hands covered in dust, but my heart light as air. For a long moment no one moved. The only sound was the crackle of the torches and the gentle snort of a horse. And in that silence I saw God turn wrath into worship. The valley felt different now. The air that once burned with anger had grown soft and still, like dawn after a storm. The torches flickered in quiet surrender, their light no longer wild but calm and golden. David stood before me, his breath slowing, his eyes fixed on mine. The fire that had once filled them was still there, but it had changed. It wasn't fury anymore. It was awe. For a moment he said nothing. He just looked at me the way someone looks when their heart has been stopped by truth. Then his voice came, low, steady, full of wonder. "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Israel, who sent you to meet me this day," he said. His words carried the weight of gratitude and the softness of conviction. "And blessed be your discernment, and blessed are you, who have kept me from bloodshed and from avenging myself with my own hands." I felt the tears come before I could stop them. My lips trembled, but I smiled through them. My body shook, not from fear anymore but from relief so deep it felt like my soul was exhaling. He stepped closer, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword, the sword that was meant for my household. But now it hung quietly at his side, harmless, humbled. "I swear to you," David continued, his voice thick with emotion, "if you had not hurried and come to meet me, by morning there would not have been one man left alive in Nabal's house. The Lord has surely used you to stop me from sin." The words sank into me like light sinking into water. My knees weakened again, but this time not from fear. It was the feeling of being caught by grace. I bowed my head, whispering softly, "It was his mercy, not mine." David looked away for a moment, his eyes glistening. I saw him lift his face toward the sky, his lips moving in silent prayer. Then he turned back to me and I saw something I hadn't expected: tears. Real, unguarded tears. They glowed faintly under the firelight, tracing paths through the dust on his face. He wiped them quickly, but I saw. And in that moment I understood. This was not just a warrior. This was a man chosen by God. A man who could weep and still be strong. The valley around us was utterly still. No man moved. Even the night seemed to hold its breath. The very ground beneath us felt sacred. When David finally spoke again, his voice was soft. "Go home in peace, Abigail. I have heard your words and accepted your gift. Peace." That one word felt like oil poured over my heart. I turned slowly to leave, my servants following behind. The baskets were lighter now, but my soul felt heavier with awe. The torches dimmed in the distance as David and his men turned back toward their camp, their anger washed away by mercy. As I rode away, I looked back once more. He was standing alone, his sword lowered, his head bowed. The fire still glowed in his eyes, but it was not wrath anymore. It was something deeper, something holy. His sword lowered, but his eyes still carried the fire of something deeper. The stars were still fading when I reached home. The first light of morning brushed the hills, and the air smelled of dew and smoke. My heart was heavy from all I had seen, but it was also filled with peace. God had answered me. David's sword had returned to its sheath and my household was safe. When I stepped through the gates, the sound of laughter greeted me. Loud, careless laughter. Music filled the courtyard. Nabal had thrown a feast. Tables were covered with food and wine. Servants rushed to refill cups. He sat at the head of the table, red-faced and shouting, his voice echoing against the stone walls. I stopped and watched from the shadows. He was boasting again, telling stories of his cleverness, his strength, his wisdom. He had no idea what had almost happened that night. He laughed at the wrong things, proud of what he should have feared. I turned away. My body was weary, my heart even more so. I didn't speak to him. Not that night. His eyes were too clouded by wine to understand anything holy. I went to my room, closed the door and knelt by the lamp. The flicker of light danced across the walls. I wept quietly, not from sadness but from wonder. I whispered, "Thank you, Lord. You did not only stop his sword. You saved his soul from guilt. You answered me." When morning came, the music was gone. The courtyard was quiet, filled with the stench of spilled wine and leftovers. Nabal sat slumped at the table, his head heavy from drink. His eyes were dull, his face pale. I walked to him slowly, the truth burning inside me. He looked up and gave a half-smile. "Where have you been, woman?" he muttered, his voice hoarse. I stood still and said gently, "I have something to tell you, my husband. Something that happened while you feasted." He frowned, confused, waving his hand as if to dismiss me. But I continued, my voice calm. "David came for blood," I said. 400 men, armed with swords. They were coming for you, for all of us. But I went to meet him. I took food, wine, and peace. The Lord turned his anger away. The cup in his hand froze. His lips parted, but no sound came. His face went white as stone. His eyes widened in shock, then emptiness. He stared at me, his mouth trembling, but no words formed. The life seemed to drain from him as he sank into his chair. The servants rushed forward, calling his name, shaking him, but he did not respond. His body was still alive, but his spirit was gone. His heart had turned cold, hard as rock. I stood there, watching in silence. There was no triumph in me, only a deep, trembling awe. The God who held back David's sword had now lifted his own hand in judgment. Days passed and Nabal died. The house that had always echoed with shouting fell quiet. The servants whispered that God himself had struck him. I said nothing. I just lifted my eyes to heaven and whispered, "The Lord fought the battle I feared." The same God who held back David's sword stopped Nabal's heart. The days after Nabal's death were quiet. Too quiet. The laughter that once filled the courtyard was gone. The house that had echoed with his voice now stood still, as if the very walls were breathing again after years of silence. I spent most of my time outside in the garden. The air felt new, softer somehow. I could finally hear the sound of birds again, and the wind no longer carried tension. My heart was still heavy with memories, but there was peace, a peace I had never known. One morning, as I watched the sunrise spill gold across the hills, a group of riders approached the gate. Their horses moved slowly, the sun flashing off their armor. The servants whispered among themselves, fear and curiosity mixing in their eyes. When I saw the leader, my breath caught. I knew that face. Even from afar, I recognized the steady grace, the calm strength. It was one of David's men. He dismounted, bowed low, and said, "My lady, David, son of Jesse, sends his greetings. He has heard of Nabal's death and asks if you would come to him and be his wife." For a long moment I could not speak. The world around me felt like it had stopped. The birds, the wind, even my breath. Me. The woman who had once begged him for mercy? The woman who knelt in the dust before his sword? The thought made my heart race. I looked down, my hands trembling. "Tell my lord David," I whispered, "that I am unworthy. I am only a servant, willing to wash the feet of those who serve him." The messenger nodded and smiled. "Then prepare yourself, my lady. The king awaits. That night I went into my chamber and lit a lamp. Its warm glow filled the room. I knelt beside the bed where I had prayed so many times, once in fear, now in wonder. Lord, I said softly, I don't understand your ways. You took me from shame and placed me in peace. You turned my tears into testimony. Now you ask me to walk another road. Let it be your will, not mine. As I prayed, I felt that same quiet strength I had known on the night I rode toward David's anger. The same peace, the same whisper in my spirit. Go. When dawn broke, I gathered my things. The servants watched in silence as I stepped out of the gate, dressed not in gold but in humility. The road ahead was long, but my heart was calm. When I saw David again, he was standing among his men, the morning light touching his face. His eyes softened when he saw me. There was no pride in them, only warmth. He stepped forward and said gently, Rise, Abigail. You are no longer a widow of a fool. You are a woman of wisdom. The Lord himself has honored you. Tears filled my eyes as I bowed. My voice was barely a whisper. It was never me, my Lord. It was always his mercy. David smiled, and for the first time I saw not the warrior but the shepherd, kind, patient, and chosen. And that was how I became his wife. Not by beauty, not by ambition, but by obedience. From peacemaker to queen, not by ambition but by obedience. Years have passed since those days in Carmel. My hair has turned silver and my hands carry the gentle weight of time. But my heart still remembers everything. The dust, the fear, the fire, and the peace that followed. I have seen kings rise, battles fought, and promises fulfilled. Yet nothing has ever felt as holy as that night when God used one trembling woman to stop a river of blood. I think often about wisdom, what it truly means. People think wisdom is loud, full of speeches and commands. But I have learned something different. Wisdom doesn't shout. It listens. It listens for God's whisper in the middle of noise. It waits when pride wants to rush. It bends when anger wants to stand tall. When I stood before David that night, I didn't feel brave. I was terrified. My voice shook, my heart raced, but God's peace carried me. Sometimes courage doesn't look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like kneeling. I've learned that true strength is not in the sword, but in the spirit that refuses to hate. True beauty is not in gold or jewels, but in a heart that knows when to be still. Looking back, I see how every painful day with Nabal prepared me for that moment. Every insult, every tear, every night I prayed for peace, they were shaping me. I thought I was surviving, but God was training me to stand in a place where peace was needed most. When David sent for me, I didn't see a proposal. I saw a promise. God had taken ashes and turned them into honor. He had taken silence and made it sing. Now, as I sit watching the sunset over the hills, I know what I didn't understand then. Every path that feels painful is still guided by his hand. Sometimes he lets storms come not to destroy us, but to teach us how to hear his voice in the wind. If anyone were to ask me the secret of a wise heart, I would tell them this. Be slow to speak, quick to listen, and softer than your pain. Let kindness be your shield and humility your sword. For the world does not need more warriors of anger. It needs peacemakers who know when to bow. I have lived long enough to see how one calm voice can stop great destruction. God doesn't always need armies. Sometimes he needs only one heart that says, use me. So if you ever find yourself standing in front of fury, remember this. You are never alone. Heaven stands beside you. And when God sends you into danger, it isn't always to fight. Sometimes he sends you to bring peace. Sometimes God sends you into danger not to fight but to make peace. And when you stand in that place, his hand will stand with you. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to pause and think about it, how one woman's calm voice changed the path of a king. Now I'd love to hear from you. What story would you like to hear next? Should we tell the story of Hannah, the woman who prayed in silence? Or maybe Esther, the queen who risked her crown to save her people? Tell me in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, like, share, and subscribe, so more people can see how God still works through quiet hearts and bold faith. Because sometimes, one story can awaken the courage in another heart. Maybe yours.